Hi, welcome, come in, sit, not at the tables. Hurry. So, hi, I'm Barri Evins. As those of you who remember me from the first night, just before I fainted, I'm just, yes, not gonna happen again, trust me. I am a storyaholic, and that means I have a problem. That means I've been reworking this until half an hour ago. Hi, can you sit in the chair, please? Thank you so much. So this is going to take every inch of the 2 hours. And if you need to leave early, you're welcome to leave early. But if you want to hear it all, I have to start now. So I'm going to ask you for one favor. If you have any questions, would you hold off on them? Unless I said something that sounds like gibberish. And I will be happy to hang out afterwards. But I have so much love for this, and I have so much that I wanted to say, that it's a full 2 hours, babies. So, thank you. So I think you all heard me introduce myself, right? So I don't need to again? No? I'm Barri Evins. I'm a film producer. I'm a screenwriting consultant. I'm a script doctor, and I teach screenwriting intensives around the country. And I speak at conferences on story, which is my favorite subject, as well as pitching and breaking in, and I teach at studios. And I love story, and I love working with ideas and with writers on ideas. So this is how I'd like to start with how I think it all started. So at some point about 50,000 years ago, give or take, hotly debated subject among scientists, we developed speech. Possibly they're saying recently now, maybe even Neanderthals, yeah? Which takes it even further back. And once we got past back, give me that rock, and you, me, cave, we started telling stories. Because that's what human beings are built for. So, what might happen after those first couple of sentences? Or just kind of like this. People sitting around in a circle, surrounded, dark, yeah, I don't know why it won't stay open, but maybe we can wedge something in it. Because I could get in myself earlier. Hi, come on in, sit down.
I'm just seeing her off for now.
Okay, cool. So, dark of night, stars in the sky, people sitting around, shadows, a fire in the center, and a bunch of cavemen and cave ladies sitting around. And one guy gets up and he says, I have a story. All eyes turned on him. And he says, well, today I went out with the gatherers. You know, like I had done yesterday, and then before that. And we took our baskets. And someone said we should go to that place where we gathered before. And so that's where we went. And sure enough, there were some berries. And so we gathered. And I started gathering. Then I gathered pretty much until my basket was full. And then we brought the baskets of berries back to the cave. And then this other guy, this young guy, the guy who looks kind of hesitant to come up into the circle, stands up. And he says, today I went out with the hunters for the first time ever. Gort got sick from, I don't know, some bad berries or something, and I've been practicing and everything, but all of a sudden I was like going out,
So, I get with the group, and I've got the bow that my dad helped me make, and we all start heading away from camp. And we're walking further and further, and it's awesome. Because like in minutes, in like no time, I'm somewhere I've never been before, because I've never been very far away from the cave. And I can't get over it because I'm seeing things that I've never seen before. I've seen trees that don't look like any trees I've ever seen before, and animals, and giant mountains, and I've never seen them before. I didn't even know they were there. I can't stop looking around. It's incredible. And then I look down and I realize I'm all alone. The whole group is gone. I can't see anybody. I holler out. Nobody calls back. I'm in the middle of someplace I've never been before, and I don't know what to do. So I just start looking around, because maybe I can find something that I recognize, something familiar. And I'm looking, and wow, way off, way over there in the distance is a megatherium. The biggest megatherium I've ever seen. Now, side note, megatherium is one of the largest mammals known. It was like a giant land sloth, weighing up to 8 tons, about as much as an African bull elephant. And although he was a quadruped, he was capable of standing up by balancing on his tail. And he had both teeth and claws. For millions of years, the megatherium had no known predators until mankind came along. And we drove them into the extinction. Okay, so standing over there, just very calmly chewing on grass, is the biggest megatherium I have ever seen in my entire life. And I think, if I could shoot that megatherium, and he would feed all of us for an entire month, it would be amazing. I would be a hero for sure, and I don't think anybody's ever done that. And if I could do that, so I decide I've got to try. I'm not going to take my eyes off him, not for a second. So I reach back into my quiver, and I get the first arrow, and my hand is shaking because I'm kind of scared, and I drop it. And I'm like, okay, that's okay. I remember what I learned, and I take a deep breath and reach my hand back real slow, and pull the arrow out, and notch it up in my bow. And I pull it back really far, and then I pull it back really farther, and I aim dead at him. And I take a deep breath, and I close my eyes, and I just let it fly. And when I open my eyes, the arrow is soaring in the most perfect arc I've ever seen. It's beautiful and silently whooshing through the wind, straight for the megatherium. And it hits him! It hits him! I can't believe it! I did it! It hit him! Only, it's like a glancing light. It bounces right off of him. He's like such a big, old, thick, tired megatherium. His skin is like leather and it bounces off of him. But you know what? He felt it. It seemed to have annoyed him. Because very slowly, he turned his giant eye and started looking straight at me. There wasn't anything else but me there. I'm thinking, this can't be good. And he starts heading in my direction. He's coming after me. Oh my gosh. All right, what should I do? I should run. So I start running. I don't know where I'm going. I just start running. The guy is so big. He starts running, and he's going to catch up with me in no time. Now I start running faster and harder, and I am running harder and faster faster than I have ever run in my entire life. One of my sandals breaks, and I don't care. I throw it off. I kick the other one off. The quiver falls. The arrows scatter. I dump the bow. It doesn't matter. I'm running for my life. I run as fast as I can, but I have nowhere to go. And he's close. Every time I think and dare to glance back, he's closer. And finally, I get to this little hill, and in the distance, I see a tree, a great big enormous tree, and I think, that's it. I head for the tree. I run faster. My legs are wobbly. I can barely catch my breath, but I run straight for that tree. And that's going to save me. And I run to the tree, and I get to the tree, and I start climbing the tree faster than anyone has ever climbed a tree. And I get about part way up, and I look over my shoulder, and that megatherium is pretty close, and I realize that when he stands up, he's going to be taller than the tree. So I start unclimbing the tree. I am unclimbing faster than anyone has ever unclimbed a tree, ever. When I get down to the bottom of the tree, just as he's getting there, and I take off running, God knows where, and suddenly I find myself at the edge of a cliff. Now you see, I think that I got to tell that story again the next night. Possibly the next night. Possibly that's where this phrase, dining out on a story, comes from. So, which story? Well, wait a minute. First of all, we're going to ask questions later, but first of all, I said we are sitting around a fire after a big meal. The story is told in the first person.
So he's obviously not there.
So we're going to keep moving forward so we get to everything. So, question. Who liked the Gather story most? Raise a show of hands. Who liked the Hunter story most? You know what? I don't even need to see. I don't even need to see who liked the Hunter story better. Because 100% of the time, to the hundreds of people I have told this story to, some of them turned and looked behind them. I kid you not. Everyone has liked the Hunter story better. So the question is, why? It's not just that the Hunter story is longer. It might be better told. But what makes the response to the Hunter story so unanimous? Surely there's some diehard Barri lovers out there that root for the Gatherer. No, it's unanimous. In the Hunter story, we see the 7 essential elements that make story tasty, that make it delicious to us, that make it exactly what our brains crave. Human beings love a good story. Our brains are hardwired for story. It goes back this many jillion years. If we start reading to babies before they can sit up, we are hardwired for story. And it doesn't matter. We love a tantalizing tale from the caveman. The guy who, before they had language, was painting and etching on the cave and signing it. His name to the story of the big hunt by crushing red ochre, taking it into a straw-like tube, and blowing it against the cave wall to leave the silhouette of his hand to say, my story, autobiographical. Yeah? So even before we had words, we were telling stories and wanting to take authorship of them. That's pretty amazing. And I think that for me, what's interesting is that story went from there to become one of the single most powerful forces ever created by the human species. How would I know that? I am not an anthropologist. Even the anthropologists can't agree. How do I know that story is such a powerful force? Because, as they say, you are here. Not here in this room listening to me. Here on Earth. Because surely you would have been eaten bad berries and died off, chomped up by an evil beast, gone into the cave and attacked by thingamajigs, if somebody hadn't told you a story about why you shouldn't do that. You wouldn't have been able to transmit culture, religion, myth. I mean, keep an entire species going if it weren't for story. Story started out as transmitting skills, as facilitating survival, as creating bonds between people. So let's break down the hunter story for a minute and talk about those 7 essential elements which are so delicious. So the first, did I not say the 7 essential elements, ladies and gentlemen? I did not. Our primal attachment to story explains, sorry, I'm going to slow down a little bit, why all compelling stories, from 5-minute YouTube shorts to epic sagas spanning multiple fantasy worlds, have the same 7 essential ingredients that our brains love. The hero, his flaw, his goal, the conflict, escalation, twists, and suspense. That combination is irresistible to our story-loving minds. I'm going to give you a handout. So, and now I'm going to discuss, now I'm going to break them down one at a time. So, the hero. What did we learn about this hero, the hunter, at the outset? He's young. What else?
His first time.
Inexperienced, right? What did we learn about his flaw? What a tripper's flaw has to do with their inner conflict. What got him into trouble?
Looking at other things and not paying attention.
Not paying attention. Yep, that's what got him into trouble. On the one hand, so now here's a concept that some people have heard me discuss, the yet, but, Y-E-T/B-U-T. A great flaw has 2 characteristics that are directly connected and directly in opposition to each other. So you can put the word yet or but in between them, right? So he wasn't inexperienced and wasn't paying attention, but he wanted to kill the giant beast and be a big hero. Yeah? Those 2 things, that's caused his big problem. So his goal, what did he want to achieve? He wanted to kill the beast and bring him back. Yep. So, the conflict, that's what stands in the hero's way of achieving his goal. So what's the conflict? What's his problem?
Kind of hard to get in the middle of theory.
Yeah, right? So he tries, and he fails. Then he tries again, but the beast isn't really hurt. Yeah? And then the hunter becomes the hunted. Serious conflict. Escalation. That's how the conflict gets bigger and bigger. Right? So how does it get bigger? From he tries to outrun it. Anyone? He loses his shoes,
This is his goal.
bow,
Makes a poor decision with the tree.
right? He thinks he's got a solution. He doesn't. Right? Twists. How does the story play out in ways that surprise us? Our brains love us. So, well, there was twist after twist, right? First twist. Anybody remember any twists?
The arrow bounced off.
Right.
Just getting lost, right?
You actually getting lost, but then you know what? If you think about it really carefully, before that, the very first twist is in the setup, in that he wasn't supposed to go.
Oh, right.
He wasn't even supposed to go. And then then he gets lost. And then he drops it, right? So it's like a little, just getting you ready for it that is meant to be overlooked. But on the 10th telling, you would be like, oh, she is clever. Okay, so, twists. twist after twist. Hey guys, if you could come up here, I would love it. The next, number 7, suspense. Do we want to know what happens next? Suspense. Did you want to know what would happen next in the Hunter story? Why did you want to know what happened next in the Hunter story?
Because you left them on a cliff with.
No, during the course of the story.
Tension to be, because I want to know the end of the story, because he's doing something.
But, think about it. I told you how the story ended before I told you the story.
Because he's telling it.
That Hunter, the guy got up, and he's been sitting around a fire after a big meal, and the guy got up to tell a story.
As long as he's relying on narrator.
But that's what's brilliant about really great suspense, is that even though you really inside your heads knew the ending, you still wanted to know what happened next. That's right? That your brain is like, oh yes, that's good, give me more. I'm really asking people to leave some questions to the end, and because I have so much to talk to you
It's more like a statement.
about.
It was more like a statement about what
Okay,
we're talking about.
Sure.
Just the idea that when we're first listening to the story,
Mhm.
even though we're told that this is what happened to me today, and we understand you're eating a big meal, it's not until you hear everything else that you put 2 and 2 together, and you're like, oh, he had to survive, and then maybe the big meal actually is the beast somehow. Maybe. We don't know.
Yeah. So, really successful suspense works no matter what. So, now let's dig a little deeper into the 7 essential elements which make story taste so good and talk about them beyond the story. So the first one is the hero, the main character of the story. Who is he? Is he a young man stuck on a farm, eager for adventure, who yearns to become a pilot and rescue a princess? Is he a billionaire, playboy, industrialist, and philanthropist secretly fighting crime? The strongest possible way to draw us into a story is with the hero. As human beings, we adore stories about human beings. And even if your story is about robots or rabbits, it is what is human about them that turns us on. So the hero pulls us straight into a story. It engages the audience. He captivates us. He captures our interest. He draws us in. Great heroes are active heroes. They don't just react to what happens to them. They cause things to happen. So, we bring us into the world of the story through the eyes and the experiences of the hero. Even if the world is one that we've experienced, or if you're introducing a very specific world to your story, a fantasy world, bringing us into it through your main character is most enchanting. So, what is it essential that we know about your hero? To understand your entire story. That's the key to beginning to build him, and the key to talking about him and telling the story. So, what is the most significant thing about it? What is the thing that has the most impact on the story using the least amount of words? It's about focusing on the essential details. It is going straight to those things that make up the 2 opposite sides of the butt. I know I told this anecdote earlier today. I'm really not interested that your hero is 6'2", unless we're in a murder mystery where the detective has determined that the crime can only have been committed by a guy over 6 feet stabbing downward. It's not essential, and you might find a 6-foot actor who's perfect for the role. It's about creating a hero that we can root for. We want heroes we can root for. Now that's an interesting word, because I didn't say a likable hero. Because we don't have to have likable heroes. In fact, some of the greatest heroes of all time have been anti-heroes. But even those guys, we root for them to do better. We root for them to change, yeah? So there's a difference between rootable and likable. You don't have to make him a nice guy. You should be making him a complicated guy with a problem, with a flaw, with something that connects us to him, makes him human for us. Sometimes in the setup, we show the audience a positive quality, a hidden trait, a little something. They used to call this patting the dog. And then great Blake Snyder, the late and great screenwriting guru, came out, and he had a way of magically creating wonderful new ways of talking about familiar concepts that made them fresh and relevant. And he called it Save the Cat. It's the same thing. It's seeing something in the hero that helps connect us to him. Okay, so one of the examples, Hang 'em High, is a Western. It's Clint Eastwood, and basically the entire story is about bad guys who want to kill him and catch him and kill him and hang him, right? Pretty much you got it right there. But at the beginning of the story, he's herding cattle, and he's got to get a bunch of whole cattle across this little river. And he gets him, he's got to hurry him, we've got to hurry him, we've got to hurry him. There's this cow, and he's stuck, and he got to get, he's on the other side already, and he has to get off this horse, go back, get into the water, and get all wet, and lift this thing up and carry it out. And that's the only thing you learn about him the whole rest of the movie. Is the bad guys chasing him to hang him high, pretty much. But that moment where he knows he's got to go back, do the right thing, it's just one calf, it's slowing everything down, but it does it, connects us to him. So, Unforgiven. Clint Eastwood has spent his entire life as an outlaw and a cold-blooded killer for hire. Not a good guy, right? Only now, what is he going to do? He's going to go after a guy way more evil than he was. The rootable guy can be the self-involved guy who learns to give it down. The seemingly bad guy who's a good guy at heart, which is revealed when he does good things. He could be an ends justify the means guy who does bad things, but it turns out it's for a good cause. They don't have to be, they can totally be anti-heroes or anti-heroines. Right? Snake Plissken in Escape from New York and Escape from LA. Great anti-hero. Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon. Ferris Bueller. Still an anti-hero, but they aren't one-note guys. They're complex. And that makes us care about them. That connects us to them. Wolverine. Wolverine is a pretty messed up guy, but like many anti-heroes, he wasn't born that way, he was made that way. Circumstances turned him into what he did. Walter White. Walter White goes from Breaking Bad to way worse, right? But we keep rooting for him the whole time, no matter how bad he becomes. Why? Because of how he's set up at the outset. He didn't seek to be bad. It seemed to be the only path available. Then when we started down it, we never stopped rooting for him, and it gets very bad. Sarah Kerrigan? Anyone? Okay. Sarah Kerrigan starts as a human, and because of her psychic abilities, she has never given a chance to live a normal life. This is how anti-heroes are made. She's courageous, she's daring, she's moral. But when she's invested by the Zerg and becomes Queen of the Blades, calculating, manipulative, determined to crush her opposition to her rule and exact revenge, she licks her victim's blood from her fingers. End of a big arc. Yeah? But in that moment of horrible evilness, she decides that she is tired of the slaughter and switches sides. Yes. To me, that's the grooviness of the massive fantasy world, is the massive arcs. So, We want heroes to change and win. Bad guys refuse to change, and they lose and they die. Okay, number 2, the flaw. Great heroes have a great flaw. It's their most significant characteristics or goals, which are in direct conflict with each other, to relate directly to what the story is about, and it makes your hero rootable and it makes him unique to your story. Right? At the dawn of World War II, a man yearns to be a great leader for his country, but lacks the confidence because of a debilitating stammer, until the crown is thrust upon him as his country is forced to go to war. Yeah? A chief of police wants to save his island town from a killer shark, but he's afraid of the water. A Major League Baseball manager wants desperately to make it to the World Series, but doesn't have the money to keep the top players. Yet, but, 2 characteristics in opposition to each other bring about this, make that flaw great. If, Roy Scheider was a chief of police in a small, landlocked country town where nothing happened, it wouldn't matter that he was afraid of water, would it? Jaws is entirely built around the concept of fear. So it makes it very specific. Your choices make it very specific. The flaw is specific to the theme of the story, the underlying idea that it's all about. I turned 2 pages. Number 3, his goal. Goal defines the stakes. You don't get to really have a good one without the other. What's the hero's goal? What does he want to accomplish? Does he want to find true love? Does he want to make it home? Does he want to save the earth from alien invasion? What does he want? And what happens if he doesn't achieve what he wants? Because with nothing at stake, there's no real involvement with the story. If there isn't something to be won or lost, that's very hard for us to care. So therefore, any great goal has to have stakes so that we're invested in whether the hero achieves it or doesn't. So, conflict. The conflict the hero faces is what is standing in the way of him achieving his goal. Conflict is essential to story. Without it, you might have an idea, but you don't have a story. Not yet. Conflict drives story forward. Without conflict, stories would be flat. Conflict alone is not enough to create a story that we want to see or hear or experience again and again and again. Conflict has to continuously increase in both intensity and in pace. So if conflict was a sprinter running hurdles, what does that mean? It means that the hurdles have to get higher and closer together the longer the race goes on. Both higher and closer together, and that is escalation. So conflict not only has to keep going, it can't stay on an even plane. It has to get worse. So, conflict increases, stakes rise, the tone grows more grave as the story progresses. Things cannot stay the same, even at a basic same level of conflict in a story. Like Snyder used to say, stasis equals death. You're done. Same. I used to have a college professor who used to say, no one wants to hear the story about the nice people in the happy village. So, escalation. There's a ticking clock, suddenly. The bomb is going to go off. The bad guys are surrounding you. The deal goes south. The challenges for the hero get steadily bigger and grow ever harder. Things look increasingly worse for the hero the closer they are to actually getting to the goal, right? So Indiana Jones gets what he's been after, but now he has to outrun a speeding boulder that will flatten him. Yeah? Escalation has upswings at major points in the story. Number 6, twists. I must admit, this is probably my favorite. A group of 4-year-olds were sitting around watching movies on DVD, and one of the kids got scared. And the other kid says to him, "Don't worry, that guy's the hero. He's not gonna die. Heroes don't die." Okay, to be fair, the second kid was the child of a screenwriter. But think about, if we understand this much about the essential nature of stories at age 4, then what will your audience who are 14-year-olds or 40-year-olds? How rich and deep is their knowledge about story? So what does that mean? It means that we are very well versed in story, and we are very good at predicting what will happen next because we've been listening to them and telling them and hearing them for such a long time. Therefore, we love to be surprised. It literally, not metaphorically, literally turns on our brains. Brains adore the challenge of something that they didn't see coming. Brains learn to ignore words that they've heard again and again and again, phrases they've heard again and again and again. Our brains don't light up with neural activity, non-dog tired and right? It's overused. I don't want to go too neuroscience geek, but what happens is our frontal cortex lights up. When you hear a story, the part of your brain that is responsible for experiencing emotion can be activated. And it can't be activated with overly familiar. It's activated by something that grabs our attention. So, what happens when you turn the brain on by something unique and stimulating? Dopamine, a chemical made in our brain, is released, floods our brain. Dopamine is really good shit, man. It's very arousing. It's very addictive. And it's such a turn on that people take very, very bad drugs like coke and meth and speed because they amplify the effects of dopamine that's already there. That's how yummy dopamine is, right? Can I get some more dopamine, please? So the truth is, our brains are on drugs all the time. And as a storyteller, you can activate them and literally turn us on. That's how powerful storytelling is. This is your brain on drugs. Our brains thrive on surprise. We love twists. And the more you throw at us, the more we're excited. So throw this one together. Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Mr. and Mrs. Smith is the story of a perfect happily married couple. A perfect happily married couple who are actually secretly highly paid assassins. A perfect happily married couple whose marriage is a complete fake, a sham. A perfect happily married couple who are actually secretly highly paid assassins, but it's a secret even from each other. A perfect happily married couple who are secretly highly paid assassins who are each assigned to kill each other. Who try so hard to kill each other that they utterly destroy their perfect, magnificent home, trying to shoot each other to death. And when they fail, their bosses send teams of killers to kill them, so they must go on the run together. And on the run, they get to know each other and to like each other. And then, when all the killers out to kill them ambush them in a home goods store, they become an incredible team, fighting back to back against insurmountable odds and survive. Twist, 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 twist. So what's genius to me about that particular story is it's an action movie, but it's hiding a romantic comedy told in reverse. Did you get the reverse? They don't even know each other. They're a perfect happily married couple, but they don't get to know each other until they're in the car chase scene. Really? That was the actor playing your mother at the wedding? Oh my God, I so hated her. And like the first authentic kind of beginning, hoorah, how are you? Do you have brothers and sisters? Conversation is way deep into the movie. And that's why that movie is genius. You know who really understands how to surprise an audience? Comedians. Because that which is surprising is entertaining. Yeah? They lead us in one direction and then they do this quick comic reversal on us. And we love it. Comedians, great comedians, are masters of the callback. They've set up this great joke, they've made you laugh all about it. I always think of Chris Rock and his Robitussin story, right? They've done all this, they've milked it for all the jokes there are in the Robitussin story. They've moved on, they're doing a complete another bit, and they go, ba-da-da-da, Robitussin, and you crack up. You fall to the ground because they laid that groundwork for you, and then all they had to go was, and you fell over. The surprise of it is so appealing. And that callback gets a bigger laugh than the whole routine that was actually setting it up. Because we didn't see it coming. We knew there was going to be another great Robitussin joke. Robitussin jokes, actually. Let's pour some tussin on that, yeah, right? We knew there was going to be another one. We didn't know that one was coming. And that's what makes it crazy good. And Chris Rock is brilliant. So how do you come up with something in your story that we didn't see coming with our jillions of years of story listening and storytelling? Well, here's where I'm going to borrow again from a technique from stand-up comedy and from my very fabulous and talented friend, Jerry Katzman, who is the top stand-up comedy teacher in Los Angeles, who is a terrific actor, who is such a good magician. I once watched him make a 4-year-old cry in fear and horror. Whom I've had the privilege of seeing him teach. And for me, first of all, this is great to be learning. And my favorite takeaway from his class was something he said, trying to help a student explore a new topic. He said, when you're working on a new topic, a new idea, I'm just roll with it. List everything you can think of associated with it. So here are Jerry's categories for stimulating, listing. Is that your bag?
No, it's Jeremy Richardson. It's called something, I don't know.
It's in the back of the room. Okay, I was like, where's that coming from?
But that's not
Okay.
something I'm familiar with.
So, when you're exploring a new topic, list everything you can think of associated with it. Everything I can think of. I'm going to draw a blank in about 2 seconds and get stiff and rigid. When you're exploring a new idea, you need to have this little trick in your bag. And so here's what he suggests. All the names, all the places, all the people, all the opposites of the idea, all the cliches of it, and all the catchphrases. And I just thought, wow, what a great set of categories to get your mind spinning, to come up with, oh, what if I did one from column A and 2 from column B, and put that together with something surprising. Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld does an entire routine on dry cleaning. Dry cleaning is relatively dull, right? He makes it funny. The great George Carlin did an incredible piece on baseball versus football. Extremely familiar terrain. But what did he do? He took what we knew and he put it in a different context and he made it funny out of juxtaposition. And he kept surprising us. Oh, we know that. But the way he put it surprised us, delighted us. Twist. Is a great way to keep creative juices flowing, things like that. And so number 7, the one you've all been waiting for, suspense. According to Shane Black, the writer of all the big action movies that started with the letter L and Lethal Weapon onward, every story is a thriller. It sounds like a simple sentence, but it's a really cool concept as you think about it a little further. It's very simple advice, but it's about keeping the audience on the edge of their seats no matter what the genre of story you're telling. Keeping them dying to know what's going to happen next. Suspense is that feeling, that edge of your seatness, that what's next. Suspense has a partner that it likes to hang around with. That partner is called tension. When I was studying directing in school and they wanted to teach us about tension and suspense, the professor took a great big rubber band and played with it in front of our class. And he pulled it out and he let it back in. And then he pulled it out and you just knew it was going to snap. It was going to snap. It was going to snap and pop him really hard on the hands. And he let it back in. And then he pulls it out twice as far as it had gone before, and you're like, oh my God! And then he brings it back in, and then further again. And that is tension and suspense. It's like, oh my God, it can't possibly get any worse. And then you let us breathe, and it gets 10 times worse. So, tension and suspense work in our brains too. So, the more engaged we are with what's happening with your hero, the more you're going to light up our brain. So the areas in our brain that we would use when we are experiencing the events of the story light up when we hear the story about you experiencing it. So if you tell me about last night's really delicious dinner, that part of my brain will light up. My sensory cortex lights up further back about here. If you tell me about running across the street to try to get here in time for the first session, the part of my brain that I would use if I were running lights up. If you tell it to me in a gripping way. How awesome is that? So therefore, we experience the story. This is why tension and suspense is so compelling, as if we're actually inside the story. If we're actually living the story, our muscles clench, our mouths salivate, our heart pounds in a scary movie. The effect is riveting. We have an actual visceral reaction. So, the story of the gatherer had a nondescript hero doing a familiar task with a predictable outcome, a vague objective, no worries, no stakes, didn't seem like everyone was going to starve if he failed, no conflict, not even a thorn, no increase in intensity, no surprises, no wondering what would happen next. None of the essential elements. And that is why no one ever likes the gatherer story best. It's not tasty. So, the beginning of the story is an idea, a core concept, a compelling notion that a story is built upon. I am fascinated by ideas and why some concepts grab us right away and others don't. What makes a concept instantly intriguing? What makes us hear a little bit about something and go, yeah, and want to know more? What is that? So, as I had said in other classes, I call these things hooky ideas because they hook you. They grab your interest, they grab your attention, they grab your imagination, they grab your brain, and they don't let go when you want to know more. They hook you. And you can't get it out of your head. It just grabs you, and neither will anybody else be able to get it out of their head when they hear it. It grabs your imagination. It intrigues our story-loving minds. So, what kinds of things do that? A variety of kinds of things do that. Some of them, like I said, I'm seeing some people who have hired me to speak before, and I've said some of these things before, and some of these I haven't. So, what sometimes a hooky idea has like an extra level of self that boosts it up, something extra about it. So, it's an incredible story, but what makes it truly astonishing is that it's true. On top of all of that, it's true. So that's Titanic, that's The Blind Side, that's The Butler, that's The King's Speech. I mean, the Titanic is a rocking story, but we really do all know the end, right? You knew the end way before you went into the movie theater. Nevertheless, there's something that makes it's a great story, and it's made all the more compelling because it's true. Sometimes something makes something a bigger idea by putting two different things together. So my favorite example of that is a story that was sold by my very talented screenwriter friend, Philip Eisner, who went in and had pitched an idea and said, it's The Shining in space. Could you push that door shut for me? Thank you. He said, it's The Shining in space. And everyone went, really? He said, yes. And we were like, well, tell us more. And he said, no, not until you pay me. And it became Event Horizon, which is The Shining in space. Right? But he does a few words, and you went, wow, that's a key idea, I want more. Maybe it's putting two genres together that haven't been put together before, or in a way that they haven't been put together before. So I spoke earlier that E.T. was revolutionary, because it took a sci-fi movie and made it for the whole family, which had never been done before. And it was a massive hit. Yeah? Maybe it's a new spin on a familiar premise. So speaking about what I love about Big was at the end of a series of body-switching movies, and then there was a big fallow period, and then now they remade all those Freaky Friday body-switching movies, and those with Kurt Russell and the dog, the computer wore tennis shoes. Can he not get back in now? Is he trying to? So the problem with that is, maybe he was take off. So the problem with a body-switching movie is you have a bifurcated hero, two heroes who go in opposite directions, and one is inevitably going to be more contrasting than the other. And Spielberg said, I can do a body-switching movie with one person. So it's about taking something and thinking about it and bringing a new spin to it, a new perspective to it. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is set in the backyard, but it's filled with amazing obstacles and tremendous monsters, and it seems impossible to survive. Maybe it surprises us with something that we didn't see coming, right? Because we love surprise. So the Sixth Sense, no matter how many times that little kid said, I see dead people, it wasn't until that moment when his wedding ring fell out of her hands while she was sleeping and rolled slowly across the floor to the door that was now padlocked that I went, right? And all the dominoes of the entire movie fell for me. God, that's sexy. You sit, it's done right, it doesn't happen until the exact moment the writer wants it to happen for you in the movie-going experience. And it's amazing. Think about all the dopamine that's released as your brain goes rushing backwards through the entire story, right? The usual suspects. That moment where the detective goes and realizes that everything he's heard, which is in the end, essentially the entire story of the entire movie, and done right, we don't realize it until that moment that he realizes it, which is so exciting. those make for hooky ideas. Hooky ideas might take a very familiar classic story to an entirely new place. Because a hooky idea doesn't really get tired. It's about, can you find a really cool, fresh way to reinvent it? So in the Japanese film, Seven Samurai, 16th century village of farmers desperate to protect their harvest from invading bandits hire 7 samurai warriors. Adapted as a Western, this became the Magnificent Seven in the Old West. A group of 7 American gunmen are hired to protect a small agricultural village in Mexico from a group of marauding native bandits who will steal their meager food. Adapted as a CGI family film, this became A Bug's Life, about a misfit ant who recruits tough warrior bugs to save his colony from a gang of marauding grasshoppers who arrive every season demanding food. 7 circus bugs, because the 2 twin bugs, pill bugs count as one, come to the rescue. In every single one of these, the samurai are inexperienced, inept, ill-equipped for the job, but they manage over the course of the story to rise to the occasion. Okay, that does sound like someone trying to get back in. All right? Those are the same exact, identical story in absolutely, completely different genres. Now, perhaps even more astonishing than going from 7 Samurai to Magnificent Seven to A Bug's Life is that there is a planned remake of The Magnificent Seven, starring Tom Cruise. We'll see. So, a hooky idea makes you want to know more. It gets you hooked. It sticks with you. It is visceral. Visceral, meaning you feel it in your insides. What? Am I missing a joke?
No,
Okay. I was like,
We're all kind of like,
what?
we're not feeling it.
Yeah, no, that's why I said I passed over that lightly, but no, I'm not feeling the Tom Cruise remake either, but we'll see, maybe it won't happen. Okay, so, a hooky idea implies how the movie will make you feel, so that you know that it will be funny, it'll be scary, it'll be mysterious, it'll be cat and mouse, it'll be smart, it'll be thrilling, it'll be creepy, right? It implies visceral part of it. You know what a hooky idea is going to feel like when you hear it, and you know who the audience is, and you can tell whether or not it's a movie you want to see right off the bat. Now, maybe you will want to see it, and you won't want to see it, and you'll want to see it, because not everybody movie is for everybody, but everybody who hears it should know whether they're in or whether they're out. So I told you, the shining in space, right? Little tiny, shining in space, 3 words. And a very talented and arrogant writer made that happen, right? So I love those. So Rick Feynman, who's an English writer whose real life backstory is a cross between a Navy SEAL and James Bond, for reals, and absolutely is charming, comes up with this great concept for an action adventure with a comic spin called Spies Reunion. Now, just by me telling you that much, really, the genre and the title, your brain can start filling in the pieces of what that movie is going to be like, because it's a hooky idea. Your brain can start going, oh, I get it. What it's going to be the old spies, and then, oh my God, the young spies are going to come in. You can start figuring that movie out right away. So here's one that's so crazy strong that the title alone tells the tale, and the tale goes on and on. 15 plus years ago, a writing team came up with a comedy that they sold to Disney for Bette Midler, who at the time was at the height of her film popularity. Here is the title of the comedy for Bette Midler and Disney. Swiss Family Rubinstein. If you can't see the poster from that, right? So it was so powerful and so well done and it got set up. And then it got what? It got put into development. And then what happened? Do I want me to tell you the story? It's a sad story for such a funny, charming, lovely, witty start. Then what happened is one day Bette Midler decided she didn't want to play Jewish. The writers had to terribly resist saying that. Have you looked in a mirror lately? So they couldn't say that, and they had to change it to stranded, which, as you can see as a title, doesn't do anything near Swiss Family Rubinstein. And it killed the project. Nevertheless, the power of those original 3 words was so strong that a year and a half ago, I was traveling from speaking engagement to speaking engagement. It was in an airport that I don't even remember where. My cell phone rings, and I get a call from an eager beaver young development executive who was going back through dead projects and had seen something called Stranded and read down another couple of sentences, saw Swiss Family Rubinstein, and went, yes, that's a movie. And wanted to find out how she could get to me, through me to get to the writers who I knew and was working with. Came back from the grave, people. 3 words. Awesome. It was hooky. It's a hooky idea. So here's the biggest thing I think that, not biggest, here's my favorite thing. Hooky ideas combine the familiar and well-loved with something new and unexpected. That's why Swiss Family Rubinstein works, because I'm leading you down a path that you know, but you don't. Flip, surprise, twist. So, it reminds me of the very old-fashioned poem about what a bride is supposed to wear on her wedding day. It's good luck. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. I have this theory that powerful ideas aren't so very dissimilar. So, something old is an element of the story, whether it's the setting or the character or the story that's been around many times before and is familiar to us. Something new, take that familiar element and incorporate it into something with something we haven't seen before. Very powerful. Something borrowed. Lots of times when I work with young writers, they really are struggling to become original, and they insist that there are no, or they listen to the people who say there are no new stories. There are no new stories. And I try to teach writers to look at prototype films, at paradigms, at classics of their movies that epitomize their genre and become a classic, an instant classic, because they're so good at doing what they're doing in whatever their genre is. And borrowing from them, not pieces, not copying, but the fact that in a strong genre story we have expectations. At the end of the romantic comedy, the guy gets the girl. If I put you through a whole romantic comedy story and the guy doesn't get the girl at the end, I will have thwarted your expectations and you will not be walking out of the theater as a happy person. Right? The good guy lives, the bad guy doesn't. Expectations. So when you look at a classic in a particular genre, and you understand why it's become this great prototype film, then you can learn about the beats, the moments, the expectations we have within the genre, and deliver them to us, and make us happy. And by doing them with your own spin, they're completely new. They are completely new. So my favorite example for that is Scream. So Scream is a total homage to horror movies by Kevin Williamson, most specifically the movie Halloween, which was co-created by Deborah Hill, whose company I ran for many years. And what made Scream genius is that Kevin Williamson was such a fan of the teen horror slasher genre that he knew everything that you expected. And he knew what you expected, and he knew how to deliver what you expected, and take what you expected and turn it against you to make it funny and entertaining. He knew what you knew, that you knew, that he knew, right? And he knew it inside out. He loved it so much that when they had the 25th anniversary screening of Halloween, and he was sitting behind Deborah Hill and in front of me, and the screening ended, and I asked him, Kevin, would you like me to introduce you to Deborah Hill? He went, no, I don't think so. I don't know what I would say. He was very famous already at the time. Because he had just worshipped this piece of work that she had been involved with, and he had dissected it and understood it and adored it and loved it and figured out every part of it and put it together in a completely different way that made it launch an entirely new franchise. Three Musketeers. Oh, something borrowed, something blue. See, I bet you thought I was going to trip myself out there, that I would not be able, not only would I forget it, but I would not be able to deliver on something blue. Something blue is, the point of something blue in tradition is that the bride should come up with something unique to her within a constraint that has to be blue. That poses a limitation. Limitations are always good. They force creativity. They make things distinctive and uniquely representative of us. And that is what the something blue is in this equation. So for our purposes, by adding in that one extra thing, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, I'm saying add into your story that which only you could bring to your story. Your something blue. So here's why movie stories, even if there are no new stories, it's not a problem. The Three Musketeers has been filmed at least once and often twice every single decade since the invention of the medium 100 years ago, first as a silent film, then as a silent short film by Edison Studios. You might have heard of that guy, Edison. And then endless versions in all mediums, contemporary retellings like the Three Caballeros, which now I think they're going to be talking about remaking, and there was a 3D version in 2011. But we don't get tired of that story of three guys who will fight to the death for each other and for honor. I was going to say, did someone leave us a gift? Okay. So, the things that I read and the things that I see doing really well are the things that are combining something familiar with something new and fresh. And that is a really big turn on for our brains. So, what I'm going to do is toss out some log lines from movies that I've been referencing and movies that I know that you're all going to know, which is just trying to summarize a story, conveying the plot, the tone, and the plot. And these are just examples of films that I know that you know, and feel free to shout them out at the end. What I like about these ideas and about these films is that they're great prototype films, and the essential elements are conveyed or implied. Okay, so a gritty thriller. A seasoned homicide detective about to retire and the hotshot young detective hired to replace him are forced to team in a gruesome hunt for a serial killer whose crimes are based on the 7 deadly sins, only to discover they are part of his diabolical plan. So there's 7. There's one sentence, and it's laid out everything. Who's the hero? What's the bad guy like? What's the conflict? What's the flaw? Right? What's the flaw? One guy's methodical and one guy's hot-headed. And that's his flaw, and that's what's going to lead to his downfall. That's his problem. That's his yak body. He wants to save the case, but he's hot-headed. He's got a fabulous, well-seasoned mentor who thinks things through, but he isn't even interested in taking time to learn from him. I don't even need to bother. You can leave, right? And you can just tell it's going to get worse, right? That those other elements don't all have to be specified, but they're implied. You can see that's just going to get bigger and bigger, and there's things that anybody who starts on the night level is going to make things that you didn't see coming, much less the heroes didn't see coming, right? Comedy. That obnoxious, self-centered TV weatherman is sent to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania to cover the groundhog's annual appearance, only to find that he's doomed to repeat Groundhog Day again and again and yet again until he learns to be a better man. Obviously Groundhog Day. So we have a hero who has a pretty big damn flaw. Because if you actually take apart that movie and watch it very carefully, it possibly takes years and years and years and years of him repeating Groundhog Day to become a better man. He becomes a concert pianist and gains life-saving medical skills, among other things. Yeah? So, a 1940s period drama. An innocent man, framed for the murder of his wife and her lover, is sentenced to a life term in a notoriously harsh prison, where he becomes friends with the most jaded prisoner there, yet maintains his unquenchable hope. Shawshank Redemption, one of my favorite movies to talk about and study. So, those hooky ideas are like coiled springs. You're just going to explode in your brain with more thoughts, images, feelings, just from those short ones that I read. Even though you knew those stories, if you hadn't, you would have still been enchanted. So when I teach my seminar, I teach three things essentially. Hooky ideas, which is the single most important element. The most important decision you make as a creative person is the concept that you're going to choose. And then, but let's not take my word for it, because I've been jammering on about this. Let me turn to an expert and quote someone for you. The esteemed philosopher / actor Val Kilmer quotes George Lucas, a guy who knows a thing or two about movies, saying, "A movie is a success or failure from the minute you solidify the concept." This is Mr. Lucas speaking. "Execution is 50%. It is the primal attachment to the concept that makes the movie work or not work." Mr. Kilmer adds, "It doesn't matter about the press or who you hired or anything. If you don't want to see Arnold Schwarzenegger pregnant, you ain't going to go." Writing, creating, is decision-making. Thousands and thousands upon thousands of decisions. The single most important decision you will ever make is that very first one. What, as a storyteller, what story will you tell? Any decision you make after that is lesser, and it should all be informed by that first decision. And the idea that it's the primal attachment to the concept that makes the story work or not work is very powerful. And that's why I spend so much time talking about concepts and ideas and working from the ground up on them. The next theme for me is thematic, which I don't know if something has been talked about very much at this conference. But my belief is that all creative people are artists. And as artists, you have a unique point of view on the world. You have something to say, and audiences need to hear it. When you focus on what it is that you're passionate about, you're bringing something to your story that is unique to you and compelling to an audience. So I work with my students on figuring out what their personal thematic is, because there is a theme out there that speaks louder than anything to you. And if that's a theme that you can tap into in telling a story, I can tell you have a vastly better chance of having people hear it, because you've created something that has resonance. So, theme. If you're a parent, your own personal thematic would be, if I were to say you can tell your child only one last thing before you send them off into the world, it would be this. You will go right to what you think is most important in the world. It's about what you believe about the world to be true. It's about what your experiences have added up to. It's about your point of view. It's about what you think is important. And the great thing about themes is that real, true, great themes, and there can really only be one in a story, are universal. They cross cultures. Themes are the message. Themes are illustrated by how the hero changes over the course of the story. Themes speak to the human condition, even if you're not using human beings as your characters, they speak to the human condition. True love conquers all. Be careful what you wish for. Good triumphs over evil. Love is more important than money. Have you ever been to a dinner party where people argue? No, really, I think money is more important than love. If I had to choose, people might argue over flying versus invisibility as a superpower, but people don't debate themes because they are universally accepted truths. So, now, at the beginning, when I told you the caveman story, did I tell you? Do you think I told you a theme? I didn't pitch you the ending. In a way I pitched you the ending, right? But the theme is actually there. What do you think the message of the hunter story was? What did it say to you? Because this isn't really right and wrong, but what did it say to you?
You should always try new things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he clearly never gave up. Even though we don't know what happened when he reached that cliff, he didn't go, "Eh, well." He didn't give up. He persevered. So that seemed like a really simple, innocuous story. And it started out as a pretty simple, innocuous story when I started telling it many years ago. But the more I started telling it, and the more I saw people look over off their shoulder to see the tree or the beast, the more I realized how powerful the story was. And the more I talked about it, the more I realized that that is another reason that it's powerful.
You could have had a Thelma and Louise moment.
A what?
Is
A Thelma and Louise moment. I think that's a little different story. So, even a simple story, an anecdote, is enhanced by a message. So for me, I was a little concerned about coming to WordCon. I was very flattered to be asked, but I hadn't been here before. I didn't know what it would be like. I didn't know if I would fit in. I didn't know if my classes would be appealing. I didn't know if people would be running around in Vulcan ears. I didn't really know anything, but I was very flattered to be asked and then told I was a VIP guest. But when I got here on night one, and Prue Thomas started telling stories, even though I was on the verge of losing consciousness, it perked me up for quite a while. And I knew that I was in the right place. And it was because the message of the stories was so universal that it spoke to me so powerfully. So the story of the short story of the ring, I have told, how long have I been here? 48 hours? I've told it at least 4 times to people who aren't here. A good story with something to say, well worth repeating. Theme, message, what you have to say that people should hear. Okay, next, the third thing is strengths. By the way, I don't usually say this, but being serious here, too serious this evening. So when I first started teaching, I came up with an acronym for these three things: hooky, idea, thematic, strengths, which adds up to hits. But then I had another marketing student in my class, and he said, you know, you could turn that around, and then you could turn it around again. Well, if you're going to turn something around, and you're going to turn it around again, I'm immediately intrigued. So he said, it could be, this shit hits. So that would be the slogan that I never used for my but it does inform my work. This stuff works. This formula works. So the last part of it is the S is strengths. And it's about discovering, and I was in I was in Thomas's storytelling class today, and it was very interesting to see the similarities and differences about how we talk. But one of the things is about it is I tell my students that they need to know who they are as a writer and who you are as a storyteller. And what that means is knowing your areas of strength and your areas of what I like to call less strengthiness. It's less strengthiness. So that when you choose something to pursue, you choose something that showcases what you're best at, rather than relies on skills that you are less confident in to succeed. So remember when you were a kid and you're going somewhere and you're kind of a little nervous about fitting in, and your mom said, oh honey, just be yourself. Your mother was actually right. Before you can be yourself as a storyteller, you have to know who you are. And that is your passions, right? Your thematic and your strengths. And when you know that, you see that mom is right, that the secret to being yourself as a writer, knowing what you do best, what matters to you, what you're good at, and what you want to say, your strengths and your passions, is going to move you forward. That's the ingredient. So it also means that when you know who you are and can just be yourself, you can avoid things where you are less strengthy, and you can favor things where you are powerfully strong. So, do you have an incredible ear for dialogue? Do you just snatch pieces of it out of the air? Because every time you write down pieces of dialogue, it just sounds age appropriate and authentic and right for that character and not like any other character in the story? Then you want to do those kinds of movies that are about characters and relationships. The genres that you like are cool. You know, if you are stumped by structure, don't do a twisty suspense thriller, because that's what makes it work. If structure just makes you go, oh, right? Stay away from that. So it's really about knowing who you are, doing what your mom said, that I believe is a straighter path to being successful. Okay, time for a story. Yes, it's been way too long. Fade in. A struggling writer and actor reduced to taking bit parts in porno movies, attends a boxing match where the underdog miraculously goes the distance with a champ. Inspired, in 3 days, he writes a screenplay he titles Rocky. Sylvester Stallone was offered $250,000 for the script, but turned it down. That's $1975. He sold it for $25,000 and the starring role, right? An aspiring writer and actor. He used what? A hooky idea. The underdog going the distance. Super hooky idea, wow, right? He used a hooky idea combined with his passions. Think about how hard you have to be struggling to take a bit role in a porno movie, to want to keep going in that movie business. So he could relate to this underdog who's getting beat up and he's still on his feet and it's impossible and nobody thinks he's going to make it, nobody believes in him, and everybody's just cheering for the champ to beat the crap out of him. Probably spoke to him thematically, huh? About sticking in there, about persevering, about staying on your feet no matter what. And his strengths. Because let's face it, I believe he could write "Go Adrian," but I don't think he would have pulled it off if it was about a little 12-year-old girl coming of age. He wouldn't have been any good at that. But he took those three things, a hokey idea, thematic, and strength, his strengths, his thematic, and put them together, and won three Oscars. Picture won 3 Oscars, including Best Picture. Stallone was nominated for Best Actor and Best Original Screenplay. On a budget of $1.1 million, it made $225 million, was the highest grossing film of the year, the 7th highest return on investment of any film made. Is from the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Yeah! Right? But when you look at that lightning bolt, it's the intersection. That's why I call it the magic triangle, but it sounds so hokey. But when you have the intersection of that hooky idea, your thematic, that relies on your strengths, I think you have the possibility for that to happen. Good story, huh? So,
It's true.
it's true. Those are the actual, every bits of it true. That's why I throw it in the box office too, because that matters to us. I think it's kind of fascinating. So we've been telling stories, we've been listening to log lines, we've been talking about what makes stories appealing, what makes them so damn tasty. So I'd like to take this last part and talk about something that is a bit different, but the same place, and that is the shape of story. And in my world is the film world, the screenwriting world, and there's a very distinct shape. But all good stories have shape, so there is a value in learning it, whether you're doing a short, whether you're doing a novel, whether you're doing an epic video game, whatever it is, we have a shape that story falls into. And in my world, we call it structure, which makes a lot of people's knees knock together because it seems so scary. And my whole job as a teacher to go, it's not scary, it's your friend. So, great structure, and here's the interesting part, is great story structure works in all the 7 essential elements at the right time and the right place. So, structure is actually how our story-loving minds have come to think of stories over the centuries. So, all these structure gurus who are out there now have their roots going back to Aristotle. So nobody, I'm not, they're not, none of us are reinventing the wheel. We're just changing up the lingo because story has had a form for a very, very long time. So easy to start with. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Any 2-year-old can tell you that, right? They've got that down, right? The story's not over yet. Yes, it is. No, it's not. But beyond that, right? So that translates into Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 in the movie. Act 1 is the setup of the story. Whose story is it? What is the hero like? Who's the hero? What's his world like? It sets the wheels in motion for the story to unfold. Act 2 is where the meat of the story takes place, the events that happen to the hero that make up the story. The biggest of the 3 pieces takes up about half of the whole story. Act 3 covers how everything the story is building up to resolves. Simple way to look at it. Now, here's where people start getting a little nervous. That's going to be fun. Because my even something as complicated as screenplay structure is actually completely available to you. In fact, it's there at the end of your arm. What's there at the end of your arm? Your hand. Stretch your left arm straight out in front of you. I am going to do my right arm so that I will be appropriately mirroring you rather than confusing you like a yoga teacher, who sometimes says I will do this and sometimes doesn't switch left and right. Okay, so stretch it straight out in front of you and point your fingers to the sky. There you go. That's it. We're done. Wasn't that great class, everybody? Okay. So that's story structure. Story structure is 5 big beats. So here's a really, really, really simple way of looking at it. We're going to start with Act 1. Act 1 is the thumb. The thumb happens to be big, meaty, big finger, right? Where the heavy lifting gets done. That allows us to do amazing things. And so if we were to follow the story, we would start right here, and we would be working through all of the big elements of the setup. Everything that goes on in there is what we need to understand the entire movie. The hero, his worlds, his problems, his flaw, who he is, what he does, what he believes. Everything about defining where he starts. Because we want him to have a big arc. Okay? One of the neat little things, and you can think of it as this little knucklehead, that we like to do, and we've talked about it a little bit, is theme. In movies these days, we tend to see the theme stated about 10 minutes in the first act. I'm not a big page count or any of this or that count person, but about 10 minutes in, someone other than the hero says what the movie's about. They may sound it in a backwards way. You can put your hand down if you want. I will hold the line up for you. Right? They may say it in a backwards way, an offhanded way, a flippant way, a casual way. They may say, in other words, the antithesis of it, the opposite of it. Like, wow, what really matters is, he who dies with the most toys wins. Right? That would be the opposite of a story that was about love is more important than money. Yeah? And it's someone other than the hero, because the hero can't possibly understand the theme over here in the beginning of the movie, because it takes all the events of the story for him to really grasp it. Okay. The inciting incident. It's the thing that gets the plot rolling. And I think it happens right here. It's the event that takes place, and if it didn't happen, the story wouldn't take place. At the inciting incident, great heroes choose to go forward. And once that happens, and the hero is reactive to it, we're in Act 2. We're in the thumb itself now. And you see this part? Kind of looks like, to me, like a roller coaster ride. Like, whee! Like you're like having really fun in this amazing curve, right? This is the beginning of Act 2, which is called by many people the fun and games, the promise of the premise. All that stuff they showed you in the trailer that made the movie look really cool, most of it happens right here. It falls in the same line with the stuff that if we don't get it and you've promised this to us and we expect it, we will feel really cheated. It's the fun and games. But boom, it starts going up immediately. Conflict starts escalating, yeah? All right, let's see, when we get here, now, so in other words, all of this area is Act 2. All of the space between the two fingers. So Act 2 is so huge that it's divided in half, one half, and another half. And the middle is the midpoint. And that's so big that we divide each half into quarters. So you see that there are 4 quarters. So that we've cut Act 2 up into 4 much more bite-sized pieces. People get really stuck in the middle because they don't have these great guideposts that are right here at the end of your arm to get them through. When you know what they are before you begin, when you figure them out, mess around and play around with them, before you have written 100 or 200 or 300 pages, them just right, and they will be your guideposts through the whole story. Okay. So, once you get the top of the thumb, we are now in a whole new world. It's a whole new world metaphorically, it's a whole new world for the hero. We're in the world of the movie. We have fun and games, those conflicts which are inherent in the premise. It's set pieces, it's trailer moments, it's fun stuff, it's juicy stuff. And Liar, Liar, Jim Carrey is unable to tell a lie because of his son's wish, the inciting incident. And now the fun begins as the complication plays out in his inability to lie, creating sex jokes, boob jokes, fart jokes, and all kinds of funny broad jokes before it gets much more serious. Yeah? In 40-Year-Old Virgin, Steve Carell gets his chest waxed. In Die Hard, barefoot Bruce kills a terrorist and sends him to the bad guys via elevator taped to a desk chair with the message, ho, 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 on his chest. Whee! It's the fun and games. It's the promise of the premise. This index finger is called by some the first pinch point. It used to be given a page number, which I think only messes people up because they think they have to write the number. So the first pinch point, what's a pinch point mean? A pinch point is a moderate twist to the story. It's a new development. It escalates the conflict, it ups the stakes, it causes a tonal shift. Things get a little more serious. It might cause a little change in the character. Hasn't going to change yet, but he might be beginning to arc. In Jaws, Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss sneak in to cut up the tiger shark, but there's no body parts inside, right? So in Jaws, they catch the tiger shark, and everybody's like, oh, it's safe to go back in the water, and Richard Dreyfuss and Roy Scheider don't believe it, and they sneak in, cut it open, no body parts, right? So it's not over. It is so not over, right? And to escalate it, Richard shows Roy just how big the mouth of the actual killer shark is likely to be. Yeah? In Groundhog Day, Bill Murray is on a dangerous drunken car ride with two far more drunk buddies, and the cop's on their tail when he suddenly realizes that because he's living in a time loop, nothing matters. No consequences. So what would you do if there were no consequences? And the tone, right? They've been doing crazy, wild things, and suddenly he realizes nothing matters. There are no consequences because tomorrow he's going to wake up in bed, listening to Sonny and Cher, right? And it changes the tone of the movie. And things get wilder and crazier and meaner until the midpoint where there's a massive tone shift. But it changes right there. What does he do? It changes from very humorous to darker. He seduces women, he steals money, he drives recklessly, and he gets thrown in jail. That's not so sweet and funny anymore, but it's exploring a different aspect of this idea. The midpoint, the middle finger. There's a reason that this is the tallest and not the one that you're thinking of. It is the major twist to the story. It is the biggest beat in the story. It is the thing that changes everything. The hero's own goal is torqued, is turned around. He started over here at the beginning of this act, and now he is extremely, unimaginably far away from there. The stakes are raised. So we just was in a class yesterday where someone says at this point, the hero's want becomes a need. That shift, that difference, it becomes, it may have been fun and games, but it's much more serious now. There is a big tonal shift. There's a ticking clock suddenly added. Stakes are raised. Everything is bigger. This stuff matters now, yeah? So at the midpoint, my theory I'm teaching is that a great midpoint is its own mini movie with its own 5 beats, with its own middle finger being the middle of the middle. And when my students see that, they see how the midpoint changes the character. So, let me give you a few mini movies. Shawshank Redemption, the hero. Who's the hero of Shawshank Redemption? Trick question, but go ahead. Anybody? Who's the hero of the Shawshank Redemption? Everyone knew what was going on. Yes, you are correct, sir. Morgan Freeman. How do you know it's not Tim Robbins?
He doesn't change.
Yes, because he doesn't change. When you're not sure who the hero is, see who changes. You have more than one character. Who changes? Excellent. You're eventually going to get that trick question from earlier. I'm convinced of it.
Oh, we spent an hour
Okay.
ago.
Okay, so here's what happens in the middle. Okay, there's a very beautiful movie in the middle of a very beautiful movie. The setup, a letter arrives from Books. The old man who's been in jail is for 50 years, and now he's out in the world, and he couldn't handle life out in the real world, and he hung himself. That's the setup of the mini-movie in the middle of the movie. And it's dark. And Red says, at first you hate these walls, and then you get used to them. The first pinch in the middle of the movie, Andy's relentless letter writing has paid off, and they get books and records. And Andy broadcasts Mozart. And Red and every single person, guard and prisoner alike in the prison, is transformed by the music. Yeah? And Red says the voices of the women singing, even though he had no idea what they were saying, made everyone feel free, if only for a short time. Little change. The middle of the middle, that finger, having been thrown into solitary, Andy explains that it was easy when he gets out, says this was the easiest time I ever spent because he had the music in there with him. Hope is something that the prison can't take away from him. And Red dismisses that idea and says, hope is a dangerous thing. And Andy gives Red a harmonica because Red had told him that he loved playing the harmonica, but Red won't play it. That is the middle of the middle of the middle. Next, the second pinch of the middle of the movie. It's where a character tends to, we haven't talked about it yet, but it's where a character tends to be starting to change and then goes backwards, or where there's another twist. And in this case, Red goes up for parole, and he says the very same thing that he said every single time that he's been up for parole, the thing that he thinks that they want to hear, and he's rejected again for parole. And then, in this mini-movie, the beginning of Act 3 is alone in his cell late at night, after lights out. Red takes out the harmonica and plays one single note. So he's letting himself experience a very tiny taste of hope. He's changing. He's allowing a little bit of hope into his being. And it's a resolution to this mini-movie because everything has built up to it. And it's showing you, not telling you. And it's a whole tale that began with Brooks not knowing how to live on the outside. The middle. Okay, so now we're here on the hand. I'm going to get puppets, finger puppets eventually, I promise. Jerry's going to crochet them for me. Okay, so now we're in the second half of Act 2. And this is where the stakes are raised. Internal and external conflict is intensified. The tone is more serious. Those hurdles that we were talking about earlier, they are higher. They're closer together. Yeah? The bad guys are coming in. Chases are happening. Battles are happening. Things are getting worse and worse. The second pinch point is another twist in terms of the arc, like I was saying when I was talking about the little mini-movie in the middle. Sometimes the hero is starting to change, but he kind of goes back to his old ways because change is actually extremely hard, and we pay people hundreds of dollars an hour to talk to us to help us even think about trying to change, and we still don't change, yes? Change is hard, but change is necessary if we're going to continue, right? So, sometimes to show that, in this second pinch point, the hero reverts a little bit, or maybe he thinks he can have the best of both worlds. The girl and money, right? Instead of having to choose. In Toy Story 2, Buzz finally arrives to rescue Woody, and what? Woody doesn't want to go home, right? So Woody's trapped in the toy collector's thing. He's finally like going, I don't know, maybe I'll be really famous and it'll be cool here. Buzz rescues him and he doesn't want to go. In 7, Morgan Freeman, yes, Morgan Freeman again, but now in the Andy Dufresne role, and Brad find the victim for sloth. And Morgan insists that the killer is playing games with them, and that they must divorce themselves of all emotion, because the killer is feeding off of it. But Brad is hooked, and the first chance he gets, he chases after the armed killer who hits him, knocks him out, but deliberately doesn't kill him. Those are all second pinch points. Bit of a different genre, yeah? Okay, so now the second pinch point, and now we're going to move into this area, which is inside of the pinky finger. Now, as we walk the pinky finger, it's the littlest finger, and things are got to move fast because all of the events of the story are pushing us toward this conclusion, which is why it works out so nicely that it's right in that place. Traditionally, right before you get to the end of it, which is going to bring us into Act 3, is a moment called, that is referred to as it's always darkest before the dawn, which means it appears that it is impossible for the hero to succeed no matter what at this point. There's no way for them to achieve their goal. They are worse off than they were in the ignorance is bliss beginning of the story. They're worse off than when they began. And if you're talking about character arc, it's all of their worst fears realized. Very dark point. In Pretty Woman, Julia Roberts realizes it could never work out, and she leaves Richard Gere, and Die Hard, the FBI takes over, and everything goes to hell. Bruce comes face to face with the villain who realizes his weakness, that he's barefoot, and he shoots the glass, right? Everything gets worse. It is the darkest possible outlook for the hero. It is as bad as it can get. The boat is sinking into the killer shark-infested waters, and Roy Scheider's all alone. Dark. All right, Act 3. We finally made it to the backside of the pinky finger. And this is the absolute shortest portion of the story. This better move fast. We are racing to the conclusion. Yeah, the entire pressure of the story has been building up to this, and we don't want to stop and introduce a new character here. We want to go, get to it, right? So, it had better be tight, it had better be fast. The hero finally realizes what he has to do. He's going to choose to fight. He's going to do something that he could never have done before this point in the story. That doesn't mean he could have never picked up the giant sword and lifted it out of the stone before. It means something more metaphorical. He never would have tried to pull this sword from the stone before, yes? Something he was not emotionally, internally capable of ever doing before, yeah? It doesn't have to be a physical feat. A hero declares his love for the first time. A hero fights to get his son back. A hero decides not to nail Andy McDowell. A hero overcomes his fears and ignores the fact that he's on a sinking boat and is going to figure out how to kill the shark. Conflict peaks, the story climaxes, quick resolution, a little bit of falling action. Our hero, by the nature of the events in the story, has been forced into profound change. And how he is changed by what he has learned over the course of the story through the events he experienced illustrates the theme, that message, what you want to say. So resolutions need to be satisfying. Not a happy ending per se, but a satisfying ending. It's all about tasty for me, right? They need to be satisfying. Rocky doesn't accomplish the impossible, right? He doesn't beat the champ, right? He goes the distance. He stays on his feet, and that was his real goal and his achievement. And he gets the girl. Huge, big difference from where he started. In the end, by having met the challenge, stayed, trained for it, worked for it, he faced the obstacles and the people who didn't think it was possible, he's gone from being a down-and-out wannabe to having gained self-respect. And he's won something far bigger and more important than the title. Yeah? Respect and love. Satisfying. And that, boys and girls, is where stories come from. I think it'll be very awesome when I get a finger puppets. So, thank you, because I was concerned that if I answered lots of questions along the way, I wouldn't get through all of this material that I wanted to share with you. But now I shall answer any questions that you might have. Mitch, what do you want to know?
Oh, it's there, I'm getting it. You'll get it with it.
Questions, thoughts, things that didn't make sense, things that did? Yes.
I know you mentioned earlier on that this is stories in general.
Yes.
Not specific necessarily to films, but films just happen to be a good way to immediately get an audience to be like, oh yeah, I saw that.
Everybody saw that.
But so there
Yes.
isn't really a big difference in how anything would be structured just because you're writing a novel. You
Well-
still have to have the essentials regardless of what form they take.
That is a perfect sentence. I will write it down and attribute it to myself. You still have to have the essentials regardless of the form. There are differences in a novel, but those essentials in that order still are very powerful and still work. The difference within a novel, the primary difference, actually, it's too good not to tell the story. I was at a screenwriting conference, and the great William Goldman of The Princess Bride and many fabulous movies was asked by an equally talented writer, Scott Frank, a bunch of questions, and then they opened it up to the audience. And someone stood up and said, Mr. Goldman, could you please tell me what is the difference between writing a novel and writing a screenplay? And William Goldman said, the difference between writing a novel and writing a screenplay is that a screenplay is much shorter. And that is because he is the most witty man on the planet, and I just wanted to talk to him. The difference is, in a novel, you have the inner lives of you. Well, first of all, you have much less restriction. Writing a screenplay is almost as restrictive as writing a haiku. In a novel, you, the novelist, set the rules. Will you have an omniscient author, narrator? Will you have an omniscient narrator or not? You decide, and then you need to stick with the rules that you set. Yes? Will you have a continuous story, or will each chapter alternate between the point of view of a different character? There are a lot more rules. But the biggest difference is that you can be inside a character's head. In a movie, I have to get whatever's inside a character's head and out and onto a screen and on a page so that it can go onto a screen so an actor can play it. So I'm always saying, how would an actor play? She thought pensively back to her childhood when she had lost her parakeet and her mother didn't seem to care. I don't know how an actor plays that, right? But you can write it in a book. So that, to me, for me, screenplay must externalize the internal in a way that is cinematic and performable. And a novel frees you from that. A novel is very big and intimidating in my point of view. I'm very, very impressed with novelists because they are creating the rules and they're following them. In a screenplay, a lot of people have spent time telling you what the rules are, and you can follow them. So I don't know if that answers your question or if Bill Goldman answered it better. But that is what I think. And I think that even with a novel, for you to structure it out, for you to have the essential elements, the hero, goal, stakes, arc, theme, things that we've been talking about, make for rich stories. You know, they could be a 5-minute animated piece. It still is rich by having those elements. That's why I believe they're fundamental to story.
Does that mean that it would be really, really difficult changing a novel into a screenplay?
It is
that
really,
a special
really difficult.
skill?
It is really difficult, and there are some people who are known for doing it, and it is very difficult because you have to figure out how to translate it, and you will absolutely lose something in translation. And they say that the only thing worse is adapting your own novel into a screenplay, which is akin to biting your leg to get out of a trap, eating off your own leg to get out of a bear trap. It's very difficult because you've created this world and now you have to create it in an entirely different medium with different demands and expectations.
Must be why there's an Oscar for it.
Yes, there's a very books. Could somebody write that down again so I can be the one who said that? Yeah, that is why there is best adapted screenplay. It is a very specific skill and it is very hard and it is a very difficult process because you're trying to do justice to something that's far bigger than a movie. In truth, a movie is more akin to a short story or at most a novella than it is a novel in terms of complexity, depth, richness. And yet we keep trying to fit them into that shoe. Any other questions? You look pensive, Mitch, or perhaps you're just in a stupor.
You've read a ton of stuff. You've seen a ton of stuff.
Yes.
For somebody who wants to do that, what's more important, the story that they have or their endurance?
So you're setting me up for saying take my class. The most important thing is the concept. That's the single most powerful thing, an idea for a movie. So a great idea, mediocrely executed, can succeed, right? Even George Lucas backs me up on that, right? Execution is 50%, 50, right? Half-ass execution, good enough with a great idea. Now, when you say perseverance, what I would say to you is coming up with a great idea is one thing, executing a great idea is another thing, and then bringing your great executed script to people's attention is an entirely different thing. And the three processes together take a lot of perseverance. And my job is to try to help people tighten each element of that up by starting with the right ingredients and learning tricks. But yeah, perseverance is good. But I think the idea is more important. I read, when I was working for Bruce Evans and Ray Gideon, the Stand By Me and Starman guys, I read this crappy script. I mean, it was bad. It was just poorly written. But it was an outstanding idea. It was a great idea for a teen comedy. Premise, it's a teen comedy about a 15-year-old kid whose parents said, whose just life at high school is miserable for him. The pretty girl would never look at him. The French teacher hates him. The other kid, he gets picked on in gym. He's just loser. All right? High school is miserable for him. And his parents say, well, guess what? We're moving in 2 weeks. Mom and I are going to leave and go to the new town and look for a place to live. We'll come back in 2 weeks and take you off. Free pass, right? There's no repercussions. What would happen if nothing mattered, right? So he can be as wild and crazy as he wants because he knows what nobody else knows is in 2 weeks and on forever, right? So what the heck, he asks the pretty girl out, and he says he's throwing a big party, and he tells off a bully, and he stands up to the French teacher, and he does all these things that he was always too afraid to do because he'd have to come back the next day and get ignored and picked on or beat up because there is no tomorrow. Great premise, right? Bad choices, bad writing, narrowed it down by making it an ethnic piece. Just nothing was good, no good dialogue, just maybe the bit of the concept of the characters and the premise, right? That's it, like there's a girl he likes, there's bullies, there's a teacher problem, right? And the idea. And I could not get it set up at Universal. I was like, come on, this is risky business. I mean, come on, this is, there's a market for this. I couldn't get it set up at Universal, and years later somebody did get it set up at Disney, and Disney-fied it, and they tried to make it like a 13-year-old version of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and it was, including mimicking the title, and it was absolutely awful, but a great idea. Still got made from a writer who just really barely understood the fundamentals of how a screenplay works. All right. Well, thank you so much.